Dr. Manoj Jain and I are talking more about meditation, and we are discussing our model of meditation in which we have come to categorize different modalities of the practice of meditation into three types. We've already discussed the idea of focused attention or concentration meditation, where you take an anchor and try to train your thought and your attention on one single thing. Now we're beginning to look at what we call open monitoring meditation or surveying meditation, where rather than focus on a single thing, what we're trying to do is to expand our consciousness, to allow our minds to be open and be aware of whatever experiences might arise.
Absolutely.
So, one of the things that arises when you try to do that are thoughts and sensations. So I'm sure many folks who have been listening to us and have tried these meditations have found that it's very difficult to be aware of a thought and not get attached to it, not absorb that thought and begin to dwell on it. So how is it that one observes a thought without being attached to it?
Sure. So the first step is to be able to observe a thought. And many people aren't able to do that. Many people aren't able to sort of look inside their mind and see the thoughts coming and going. And once we begin to do that, then we become attached to the thoughts. We take one thought and it links to another thought and it links to the other thought. This is how I think about it. If I label a thought, oh, right now I'm thinking about a patient at the hospital, and I acknowledge it, what happens is the thought is acknowledged, and often, like a misbehaved child, it doesn't bother me anymore if I've acknowledged a misbehaving child. And that allows me to then see other thoughts that might be coming and going. I've often talked about the analogy of sitting at a riverbank watching boats pass by, which are like thoughts which are passing by. And so it's really important to be able to observe your mind with thoughts coming and going, but not being attached, not evaluating them, not judging them. Because once you begin that process, then you begin the process of thinking, which is away from the process of just sheer awareness.
Yeah, one of the ways I like to think about this experience that you're discussing is to think of myself becoming an observer of my own mind. So I'm a witness, like you say, of an individual sitting on a riverbank watching sailboats pass by. So I watch my mind. I become the observer of my mind rather than being absorbed in the thinking process. One of the problems I think that we get into as human beings is that not only do we think a lot, we're not aware that we're thinking. We get so absorbed in our thoughts that we begin to dwell there. What we're talking about is sort of taking a step back and watching our thoughts as they arise. And one of the things that I've learned in just simply watching my mind work is that thoughts don't last long. They, like everything else, are really quite transitory. And the only thing that keeps thoughts arising is when I provide it with certain kinds of energies.
Sure. And one of the exercises that we do in our class is we tally our thoughts. Just like you would tally the number of runners who are passing by, or you may tally the number of cars which are parked in a parking lot, I can tally my thoughts. And those are ways, through simple exercises, we can become aware of our mind and our thoughts that are coming in and out of our mind.
Before we move on to talk about the third category of our model, which is self-transcendence, I want to make sure that we're clear about the idea that we're not talking about a progression of modes of meditation, so that focused attention is not like the foundational component and then you move to open monitoring, then you move to self-transcendence. There's no hierarchy involved here. But how would you describe the relationship between the different categories?
Sure. I look at focused attention as a beam of laser light. It is focused on one and only one activity, a word, or an image. Open monitoring is more like the rays of the sun. you're able to see the vastness of the mind, the thoughts which are coming in and out. Now, focused attention doesn't begin the meditation process, and it doesn't have to progress into an open monitoring process. They themselves are very useful activities and modes of meditation. However, focused attention tends to be easier for many folks, and they begin with focusing on the breath. And then people go into practicing open monitoring or self-transcendence meditation. But one doesn't have to be a process to lead to the other.
But I can also say that it is possible to choose which form of meditation you would practice in a particular instance. Are there certain situations in which it would be preferable to practice focused attention as compared to, say, open monitoring?
Yeah. Well, at certain times when I am at a chance to reflect, I tend to use an open monitoring. So I say I have time to sort of reflect and take some time. I use that. At other times, when it might be a moment when something has happened and I am not able to control my surroundings, I just take 3 deep breaths and continue a focused attention on the breath as a way of doing my meditation. There are other times I like to use self-transcendence, especially for and when I'm with a group of people with spiritual practice. I find that to be very useful at that time.
Well, we'll come back to spiritual practices and to self-transcendence momentarily, but I wanted to wrap up this particular conversation simply by saying that in both open monitoring and in focused attention, we're talking about attention.
Yeah.
Both modalities involve awareness, and so it's important that we keep that in mind because that's what meditation and mindfulness is all about. There are different kinds of attention. One is, as you say, like a laser beam focused on a particular thing, and the other is maybe broader, more like sunlight. But as the whole metaphor of light seems to suggest, it's all about seeing things and seeing clearly.
Yeah.
So when we come back, we'll be talking about self-transcendence, and we'll see you then.